teachers matter because we learn different things every day.
They push you to always believe that even if something is hard, you can still achieve it.
They're constantly encouraging me, and they're trying to make me reach that stretch goal.
My teacher has taught me to worry about my education, what life will be in my future if I don't finish high school.
Mr. Coffee's taught me how to count.
She's definitely taught me to not be biased.
He's taught me some great science.
She makes me look for more sources.
For me to see that somebody was just like me and was able to succeed, she has inspired me to be a better person.
I love me. Good. Having a great teacher makes things possible.
He's my dad, he's my mom, he's my friend, he's my psychiatrist.
He kind of believes in me unconditionally, so that way it's easier to believe in yourself.
Looking for support and mentors in the community, and she had the wonderful foresight to introduce me to Dana Hoff and the Autism Tree Project Foundation, which really became a rock in our lives in terms of helping us navigate the educational road and the social road with our son Aaron. Over the years, in addition to that, my daughter has had the opportunity to volunteer for Autism Tree Project Foundation, as well as our son, Aaron. Both kids, I have a third child who unfortunately has not yet had the opportunity because of the pandemic hitting. But nonetheless, these volunteer opportunities have been crucial and formative for my children in helping them to determine their path. The particular topic we're focusing on today is making the transition from high school either to college or to some other type of transition program for students who are on the spectrum. When it came to my son, he identified at a young age that he did want to attend college, and so we were, of course, very supportive of that. I will admit that I definitely had concerns. And my concerns were not related to academics, but they were related to things like executive function skills, having to do with registering for class, for example, as well as time management skills, social skills having to do with living with a roommate. All of these areas I knew he would find to be a bit more challenging, perhaps, than his neurotypical peers. But I also knew that with the right supports, he would be able to be successful. So to push the rewind button for just a moment, I would like to also share that for high school, he attended Canyon Crest Academy. And my phone just started ringing and I need to go, comes in through my screen. Anyway, at Canyon Crest Academy, there was actually an academic support class that was very instrumental in preparing Aaron to be ready to go off to college. There was quite a bit of focus on executive function skills, which I mentioned earlier, as well as independent living skills and social skills. So given that whole fact that he had a lot of preparation in high school, it set him up for success for once he was ready to apply to college. So then I can fast forward to Aaron's junior year. During his junior year, I met Kelly Corey, who will be speaking today as well. And Dana, I know, will be introducing her. Kelly is a consultant who works with families whose kids have any type of special need, and they're looking for placement options. And of course, she'll get into more detail. But once I met Kelly and described what type of student Aaron is, and she also met Aaron, it put us in a position where Kelly was able to advise our family on some different options for Aaron. One was in California, one was in Colorado, and one was in Oregon. And we took that information and evaluated it, and all of those options were related to where would Aaron live when he went to college, because I felt that for his first year, it was preferable for him to be in a more, shall we say, family oriented, supportive type of environment where if questions came up, there would be adults available to help him navigate. And what we ultimately concluded was the University of Oregon, where he lives, is called Mansfield Hall. And Rebecca, would you mind putting up the Mansfield Hall slide, please? Thank you. So we were very fortunate that Mansfield Hall was constructed just 2 years ago. And when it came time to visit University of Oregon, in fact, it was only the frame was up, not the whole building. And the way it's set up is that the front part of the building has common areas where students receive academic coaching, life skills coaching, etc. And then toward the back of the building are townhouses where each student has a roommate, but they each have their own room within the townhouse. At Mansfield Hall, they organize all types of social activities, things like going kayaking, volunteering in the community, having community meetings. Rebecca, do you mind putting up the next slide, please? This slide speaks to the 4-core approach to college transition, which is elucidated by Mansfield and implemented. And as you can see, they focus on really integrating these 4 areas related to living, which I've already shown you where they live in the setup in that respect. Learning, so there are academic coaches available if the student needs help in a certain with a certain class or a certain topic area. The giving component, I have to say, that really speaks to me probably the most, and it harkens back to what Dana was saying. This idea about giving back in our community is fundamental to our being human and our making an impact on this world. And so I know that Aaron has had the opportunity to volunteer for the Parks and Rec of Eugene, where he lives, to the point that he's gone to some of their local parks and done cleanup projects. And were he not at Mansfield Hall, I don't think he would have independently seeked out this volunteer opportunity. So it's really just such a cool thing that he's been able to do that. And then the 4th pillar is engaging, which has to do with making sure that the students are interacting with each other and people aren't just holed up in their room, perhaps reading, playing video games, or not being social. So it's fine if you take down that slide, Rebecca. In general, I would say that his first year has been really, really successful. I would add that it was very stressful when we were making the decision because the pandemic had just hit. And so if we think about a year ago, March, and I see Kelly nodding, I was really at my wit's end. We didn't know much about how COVID was being transmitted. We weren't aware of so much the aerosol transmission. People were, as you'll recall, thinking, oh, it could be conducted, through surfaces. There were the information was still coming out about the virus. And I asked myself, my husband and I asked each other, should we send Aaron now or should we wait? Well, Mansfield Hall came up with a theme or a campaign where they said that it was called Safer at Mansfield. And they explained that when students arrived, they would quarantine, and then they would become a bubble, which meant that parents or family members and even friends who were not part of that bubble could not visit. And so when we sent Aaron off to college, it was always my vision or my expectation that we would accompany him when he went to college. Well, because of COVID, we decided it was best for Aaron to go on his own. And he did that, and he did it successfully. But part of the reason why I know the transition was so successful is there was a person on the other end to receive him, someone from Mansfield, and they helped him settle in. And now, what we're looking at for next year, Aaron did have the option of living at Mansfield another year, but he informed my husband and I that he would like to live in a dorm on campus. And that's actually, I think, a really great thing. I wouldn't have minded. We wouldn't have minded if he stayed at Mansfield, but this is a chance for him to grow and learn. And Mansfield continues to provide kind of background help as he needs it. So he can continue to rely on them, but he can go live on campus with a roommate independently. So I think that's my general overview. And I'd be happy to turn it back to Dana at this point to introduce us to Kelly, who can go into even more detail. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Julie. I know everyone on this call, including me, finds this information so valuable for our families. We literally have hundreds of teens and I want to make this a theme at our neuroscience conference, as we did last year, which is, it kind of ties into early intervention for autism at work, the pathway to it all. So this is fantastic information and timing. Rebecca and I had a Zoom call not long ago with Kelly, and the truth is, like what I experienced with Julie and her mom, they always find these remarkable opportunities in people. I haven't seen anything quite like Mansfield Hall, and I haven't met anyone quite like Kelly. So it's a great blessing to bring Kelly on with you, Julie, and I really enjoyed meeting you, Kelly, as did Rebecca. So we'll turn it over to you to talk more about how you work with families.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks, Julie, for the introduction. I am an educational consultant. I have social work is my background, and I worked in treatment centers for many years, kids on the spectrum and other kinds of mental health disorders, and have been in private practice. And educational consultant is a broad term. It can mean different things. I don't specialize in one disability area, but rather I work with kids who have all kinds of disabilities, through young children up through young adults, and looking at the different options. So my job is to know what's out there nationally, some internationally. I visit 75 to 100 programs a year. And so my job is to assess the situation, figure out what a child needs, what the family is looking for, and provide options based on firsthand knowledge, and then support that family typically for about a year while that student is there. So I think with Aaron's case, I think they got referred to me through their physician. And I went and met Aaron, and I spent time at his school, and we talked about what his goals were and what he wanted. And Aaron is just one example of a student, and he was gung-ho to go to college, but what he wanted versus maybe what he needed sometimes didn't always align for all of us. So finding, I am not a college placement consultant, but I find and work with programs who support young adults in college. So that's an important distinction. So Mansfield is one example of, but there's many programs out there nationwide. I wanted to talk, if you can go to the first slide, a little bit about just higher education and how to manage that. And this applies not just to autism, but kids with all kinds of disabilities, whether they be physical or learning disabilities. But I think it's important to know that for a college, they are not required to support students. So unless you trigger that and go to them and say, and prove that your child has a disability, then they don't have any obligation to serve them. So it's important that you have updated testing, typically within the last, most colleges, it's 2 to 3 years. So you can't use their autism initial special ed eval from when they were in elementary school, for instance. You have to have an updated educational proof that they have a disability. Then you take it to the college that you're looking at, to their disabilities office. Sometimes they call it a student assistance center. They have sort of different names, but essentially disabilities office is a pretty common one. And you show them the proof that they have the disability, and then they say, here's what we can provide at our school for your student. And some of those are, there's a wide variety. If you want to go to the next slide, I think some of the important ones are what I've listed here. Early registration is amazing that kids can get this. That means they get to apply and register for classes before other students. So like athletes get early registration, students with disabilities. That means they get to pick the best class times. So if they're not a morning person and they don't want to take an 8 a.m. freshman class, guess what? They get first choice, so they don't have to. So that's early registration is really a wonderful accommodation. And some of these other ones are similar to what you would see for your child in elementary school and high school. I think some of the differences are, though, what might have mattered, say, in high school. Let's say if they have preferential seating at the front of the class in high school, maybe that's not important in a room with 20 kids or 30 kids. But if you're in a lecture hall with 150 students, that might be really important that they're up the front. They can see the teacher's face. They can have some interaction without the distraction of all the other kids that are on their phones not paying attention, for instance. So these are just some of the things that they can be eligible for, but you have to ask for it. And my advice is you ask for everything. Get as much as you can, get it built in. And then if your student doesn't need it and finds that it's not helpful, no sweat. Then they just don't utilize it. My daughter, I'll speak a little bit, she's not on the spectrum, but she has some significant learning disabilities. So we went and did this. And as a adult, being 18, right, she has to sign everything. She has to re-register and re-ask for these things each year. So it's not automatic. So it is reliant on student initiation. Some kids can do that, other kids can't. And we'll talk about that a little bit further on. But she utilized the note taker a lot. So she could pay attention in class without worrying about writing all the notes. So they assigned an anonymous note taker. She never even met the person, and that person sat in all her classes. The teacher knew there was a note taker in the class. And then she would just get the notes emailed to her after class. So that proved to be a really helpful accommodation for her. Some students that they might not need that. This is a slide I think that you can use for your student. And this is something, just a takeaway that you can have, that you can talk to them about different things. Some kids can do this, some kids maybe not so much. And that might be where they need a more supportive environment, where you can either add in, go ahead to the next slide, Rebecca. You can add in extra supports a la carte from the outside. You can hire an executive functioning coach. You can hire, therapists or mental health providers, or you can utilize a place like Mansfield Hall where they have those support systems built in. Some of the things Julie referenced about applying, signing up on campus, just getting used to a campus, navigating a map, navigating how do I get to this class in this building, and how do I plan enough time to walk across campus if my classes are far apart. So you want to practice. You want to do as much of that before school starts as possible. They need to know where that disabilities office is. So you should have done that in the very beginning. So if they have to go there to meet with an advisor, to take a test, to get tutoring, they can do all of that ahead of time. And I think the other big change, or one of the many big changes with college too, is how they communicate their need for help, right? So if they're in I keep going back to Aaron as the example. He's at Canyon Crest. He has his go-to people at school, right? When you go to college, it's so much more removed, right? You don't have your go-to professors. You don't even know them. Sometimes you don't interact with them at all. So that landscape is very different. And for somebody that struggles with initiation, with social skills, that can be really intimidating. So any support you can build in so that they have a connection, a personal connection with their professor. They send them an email at the beginning of each semester, and find out what the office hours are. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So some of the barriers that a student might have, they might, I think you can read this, but they often know what I need to do, but initiating it and having the skills to do those skills is a totally different ball of wax, as we know. So I think the other thing that's important in college is they might be embarrassed, right? They might not want to walk into the disabilities office. They might not want to be identified as a student with issues. And college is a great way to fade into the community, right? So there's an issue about anonymity and embarrassment that I think we need to be aware of. And they want to be grown up. They want to be able to do all this on their own. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Yeah, so I think if we look beyond just the academics, I mean, college is a big step for anybody. And for any student moving into, okay, how do I be on my own when my parents have done pretty much everything for me up to now? How do I manage a checkbook? How do I, make sure that I have access, that I know when to go to the doctor? I mean, simple things that we don't even think of. I have a handout that you'll get that you can take away if you want, that really was from a social service agency for, actually it was for foster care kids, but it kind of goes through all these different areas to check off different independent living skills. And what I would advise, particularly for the parents that are listening, is go through that checklist. Some of it won't apply. Some of it you're like, oh yeah, my kid knows how to do that. Great. But go through and you might be surprised at some of the things you're like, oh yeah, well, we never really talked about that. We never talked about, oh, when you go to the doctor, you have to fill out the forms and you have to pay the copay as an adult. So there are certain things that you just want to do as much of that before they leave the house as possible. Now, if they are going to a supportive environment like Mansfield Hall or a transition, they're going to get help with that. That's built in, right? There are coaches, there are residential staff, there are people that are holding them accountable to say, hey, when's the last time you took a shower? That kind of thing. But if they're on their own in a dorm, not so much, right? So you don't want to be calling or texting them every day. They don't want you to be calling or texting them every day either. How are they going to build friendships so they're not sitting in their room? That graphic that Mansfield Hall had about the social piece is getting them out, volunteering, like Julie mentioned, getting them off the computer. It's one thing to get to class on time, but what do they do with the other 40, 50 hours of the week? What are they just sitting playing video games? Or are they joining clubs? Are they, going down to the meal hall? Are they seeking out some relationships, which can be really scary, particularly, I think, for the first time out. Go ahead to the next slide. This is that tool I told you about, and there's about 9 pages. Some of it's very specific, but you can look at that at the end. So what about, is college the only option, right? We know it's not. I mean, some kids aren't ready at post high school to go off. There are gap years. There are workability and job training programs. Sometimes in the young adult transition programs, like Mansfield, their students are all going to college, but there are other kinds of programs where that's not the case. Maybe a student isn't ready. Maybe a student needs to build up some job experience because of desire or because of ability. Maybe, college just isn't in the cards. So there are a variety of programs that can help them with job training, job assessments, that can follow them and support them in job shadowing. Go ahead and go to the next. Beyond just getting ready with resumes and interview practice and all that, but teaching them how to be an employee. If it's their first time, and different than volunteering, right? Being an employee is a whole different set of things that you have to navigate. How do you talk to a boss? What do you do with your paycheck? Do you get automatic, banking into it for your paycheck? How do you pay taxes for the first time? So there's all of those things that as they're moving and transitioning into adulthood, there's just a myriad of things they have to navigate. And that's hard and stressful. The last thing I just want to touch on from the parent perspective is, especially if you've had a child with special needs, is your job has been to do everything, right? To guide, to navigate, to pull together the resources, to get them to all of the people they need to get to. And how do you move from that, where you've done everything, to they're doing it themselves, right? You have to have some faith in where they are. But I would say one thing that's been very important for parents is having discussions with them before they go about what your expectations are. They need to sign all of the releases and the HIPAA stuff so you can log in and see their grades, so that you can call and talk to people at the college, because they won't talk to you if your child hasn't signed that, which is a big shock for some parents. It's like, what do you mean? I'm paying the bill. Doesn't matter if they haven't signed that form. They're not allowed legally to talk to you. What are your expectations? Are you going to give them a stipend and say, okay, you're going to get $100, $50, whatever it is a month? And for that, you need to, don't call me when you need mascara from CVS, or you need, whatever. You'll be surprised at the things they come up with. But really, it's that mindset of shifting from, you're not doing it for them anymore. You're becoming the watcher, right? You're watching, you're paying attention, but you now have to refocus your time. So self-care, maybe, you shift into a different job or different hobbies, or you have to fill your time in a way that now it's different. And that's a big deal. The next slide, yeah, thank you, is just some tips about what to say, what not to say. I think really the important thing is just don't do everything for them. You're used to doing that, and it's a really big shift to go to when they call and they're upset, they're in crisis, they're struggling. You don't solve it. You teach them, say, how are you going to manage that? Who can you talk to? Don't just jump in with the answer, because you're trying to teach them how to navigate that themselves within reason. You have to trust your gut. And this is just one of my favorite quotes that I love, that I think is applicable in this scenario. But thank you, and I will be happy to answer any questions as they come in.
Thank you so much, both Julie and Kelly, for sharing your expertise. As you can see, our guests today not only come from their experience and their expertise as educators and an educational consultant, you also have a really big heart because you are personally connected, helping your son, Julie, and Kelly. You are a special needs mom as well. So we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to our community and our parents. We do have a lot of questions in the chat, which we'll get to. I'm going to get to that first person who's raising their hand. Carol, you can go ahead. If you want to unmute yourself, you can. I will also cover other questions too, but Carol, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Actually, I accidentally did it, but I have so many questions, but I'm just going to ask one now. You know, one of the questions I had, like, well, I actually happen to have a son at college who is on the spectrum as well and is home for the summer. And, you know, he's gotten support in college. And I was wondering if there's someone that helps students, like when they want to look for jobs and how you do resumes and how you, you know, interview for jobs. And if it's something Autism Tree provides support in, or consultants, or how we help a teenager now who's, you know, finished his first year and is just sort of just sitting on the couch trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I'll talk. There are folks, if it, you know, I don't know where you live, if you're in San Diego or not, but there are people that you can hire who are life coaches, job coaches, that can help students with some of that. Some are more hands-on than others, but there may be some services through Regional Center and Workability. I'm not sure about that, but there are private people that you can hire. And if you want to contact me after this, I'll be happy to make some referrals for you.
Okay, thank you.
And Carol, I know that you also asked, can we have access to these slides so we can reference them? Yes, I will be sending out a recap email with all of the different resources that Kelly shared with us with the PDFs. She briefly went over, and you can access those resources as well. And of course, it'll include as Kelly's contact info as well. And you can reach out to her directly or myself, and we can connect you. All right, and thanks to Stacy Jensen. She just typed in, the Regional Center is offering some life skills courses for my son this summer. Stacy, we'd love to hear more about that. If you want to elaborate, you can unmute yourself, and anybody else can type their questions into the chat too.
So my son turns 18 this week, and he's a senior in high school, and he is planning to go away to college, and I'm very concerned about how he's going to manage an apartment and medications and getting to class on time without mom there reminding him to be on time. And our service coordinator, she said, I know he's getting ready to graduate from high school. We offer some life skills courses. Would you be interested? And I said, definitely. So I don't know yet details. She just told me that they would reach out to me in the next few weeks and let me know what they offer and when. So that's an option.
Thank you, Stacy. We also have a Ready, Set, Go program as well, where we do workshops about quarterly at Autism Tree. Right now, we're doing everything virtually, and we feature different guest speakers and different life skills workshops as well. So I can definitely put anybody who's interested, you can reach out to me directly. We'll put you on the email list so that we can let you know when our next one is. And Julie, I love that you typed in the chat. Thanks. Here's another piece of advice for parents. Don't be upset if your kid never calls.
Yeah, for sure.
They are definitely living their own lives. It's good for them to be independent during this time. Wonderful.
I would balance that though, just by saying, don't wait till the end of the first year to really know what's going on, because you know, you're not getting a lot of information, which in some ways is a relief, right? But in other ways, if you wait till the very end of the year and then realize, oh my gosh, they haven't been to class, their grades are tanked, you know, just keep an eye on it throughout the year, but from a distance, if possible, is my advice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. I know that Jeff, he just typed in the chat. Jeff is one of our adults, and I know Dana mentioned him a little bit earlier. He has been on our neuroscience conference panel before, our Living Autistically panel. Jeff, we would love to hear your story if you want to say a little bit about transitioning from your perspective. I know you're working right now, so go ahead and tell us how you transitioned from when you were a young adult.
Well, it was not really it was really not the smoothest transition out there, but one of the things that I'm doing as an advocate is to try to convince young adults who are looking for employment to not wait till after high school to get a job, because what happened to me was I didn't end up getting my first paying job until after I got out of high school. I think one thing I am trying to recommend is that teenagers with autism, they should start looking while they're still in high school. I mean, they could, do night jobs, they can do weekend jobs, just something to gain the experience now than, waiting until after you graduate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jeff. You reminded me of a really good resource that we have at Autism Tree. Cheryl Morin used to run the Autism at Work Autism at Work, it's like a high school intervention, early intervention for high schoolers for employment program at SAP, and she is now doing it as well. Currently, she lives in the Bay Area, and she also was featured on one of our past Lunch and Learns. If any of you would like to go back and speak, it's recorded on our YouTube channel and see it. She is an expert on that, and I'm sure has many other contacts on, she's on the front lines of Autism at Work, preparing our kids so they can be exposed to different employers who do have those neurodiverse hiring practices already going on. Dana, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more. But
yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Jeff, this is really timely that you're stepping forward, because I know you always like being involved in our neuroscience conference. And I think it's critical to have you share that at our conference, because we always have an Autism at Work panel. And I'm quite excited that I think we're going to have one of the highest ranking VPs at a nationwide company called Mass Mutual. And I think you met Kelly, Jeff, on
Yes.
when she did the Lunch and Learn. So it would be fantastic for her to be involved on the Autism at Work panel, and you to speak directly about how important firsthand it could have helped you. And to really bring that message forward in a personal way is going to be very important this year. So thanks for kicking it off here. Like I said, I kind of see a synergy between our Lunch and Learns and our building our first virtual neuroscience conference, which we know is going to be an incredible opportunity for all of our global and national, partners and sponsors and everything. It's going to be a lot different this year, but I'm very, very excited about it. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it needs to be included in the agenda for this year.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, if nobody has any other questions, then I would love to take a group picture. Thank you. Karen says, powerful Lunch and Learn. Thank you, Julie and Kelly. Thanks, Karen, for joining. I'd love to take a group picture with everyone. If you would like to share your camera, please, now is the time to turn it on. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining our Lunch and Learn. Again, thank you, Julie, and thank you, Kelly, for your expertise and sharing and taking the time. This was so valuable to every single one of us. So thank you
for having us.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I hope everyone has a great day.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
See you next week.
Have a good one.
Hope to see you all next week.
Yes. Have a good one, you guys. Take care.